And one of the most interesting things which I find is actually to read and the Vinaya, the discipline, the code of discipline for the Buddhist monks. When you read that Vinaya, you see some of the most amazing stories that you might, which I said before, is almost like reading a newspaper today, some of those stories. And these Vinaya rules, they always have an origin story, which explains how the Vinaya rule came about. And the Vinaya rule is like a rule of discipline for the monks. And the origin story tells you of the kind of misconduct that some of these monks were up to at the time of the Buddha. And you'll be surprised. There were like killings going on. Monks were killing each other. They were like stealing. There was one story where they were stealing from the king's timber yard because he wanted to build himself a kuti. So he just went into the king's timber yard and thought, oh, this is nice wood. I'll take some of this. But of course, it's not recommended to steal from the king's timber yard if he finds it out. That's what happened in this particular story here, etc., etc. And it's when you see that, you get away from this idea that some people have that at the time of the Buddha, everybody was special. They had really powerful spiritual powers. They were different from what we are today. It's not the case. At the time of the Buddha, people were exactly like people are today. There wasn't that much difference. They had defilements, we have defilements. They had kindness, we have kindness. And essentially, it is a continuum. Human beings are always going to be human beings. And the time span we have in between 2,500 years, 200 years, 25,000 years, 2 eons, is not going to make any difference. We are still basically the same. So by looking at it in this way, you can take away some of that gap in time between us and the Buddha. Now the other thing which I always felt was a little bit of a barrier between me and the Buddha was the fact that the Buddha was from India and I was from somewhere in Europe, or now in Australia, if you like. And I felt that, well, I went to India a few times and I thought, well, this is really different from what I'm used to. I can't really relate to this society all that well. And again, I felt the sense of distance between who the Buddha was and who I thought maybe I was. But again, you start looking at it more deeply, you realize that the cultural differences and the kind of social conditioning that we have, again, is a very shallow thing.